Have you ever thought about how a dessert could spark a fierce, century-long international rivalry?
Or how a simple plate of sweets could capture the exact physical essence of a human being.
Right. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a really fascinating stack of your sources today.
Yeah, the culinary articles, the translated notes, all those historical tidbits you sent over to us.
Exactly. And we are extracting the incredible story of the Pavlova. I mean, reading through the materials you sent over, the hidden history sitting right there on the dessert plate is absolutely captivating.
It really is.
We are going on a journey today.
Setting the stage for you, the listener, it is crucial to understand that this isn't just a recipe breakdown.
No, not at all.
What we are really looking at here is unique intersection of early 20th century pop culture, a rather bitter geographic border dispute, and the highly delicate chemistry of baking.
It's basically a perfect storm.
Exactly. History, culture, and science all baked into one dish.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the dessert, you really have to understand the namesake.
The muse behind it all.
Right. We are talking about the world-famous early 20th century Russian ballerina, Anna Pavlova.
And the sources you provided make it clear that she wasn't just a successful dancer.
No, she was an absolute global phenomenon.
I mean, the story really kicks into gear in the 1920s when she's embarking on these massive world tours.
To truly grasp the scale of that fame, we have to look at what global travel meant in the 1920s.
Right, because it wasn't just hopping on a 14-hour flight.
Not at all.
Yeah.
For a Russian ballerina to travel to the other side of the world, to places like Australia and New Zealand, that was a monumental, society-stopping event.
We are talking about weeks on ocean liners.
Yes, weeks. So when she finally arrived, it was akin to modern rock star hysteria.
People were losing their minds.
Completely. During these 1920s tours, Anna Pavlova developed a fiercely devoted fan base down under. People were completely captivated by her presence, her grace, and her artistry.
Entire cities would basically shut down to watch her perform.
The notes you shared highlight a wonderful anecdote from that era. A local chef, entirely captivated by her performances, wanted to create a culinary tribute.
He was completely starstruck.
Oh, absolutely. But he didn't just want to name a random heavy sponge cake after her. He was specifically inspired by the striking lightness of her ballet costume.
The tutu.
Right, the tutu.
Yeah.
The goal was to make something that felt the exact way she looked on stage. Floating, defying gravity.
It is such a romantic, artistic way to approach food.
Translating the movement of tulle and silk into sugar and air.
It is a brilliant translation of visual art into culinary art. You have this ethereal, delicate, seemingly weightless dancer, and the chef is tasked with capturing the very feeling of a ballet in the kitchen.
But as beautiful as that artistic inspiration is,
The moment someone creates a masterpiece, someone else is bound to step up and claim it was their idea first.
here's where it gets really interesting. Because you cannot talk about the Pavlova without talking about the Great Down Under Dessert War.
Oh, the kitchen war.
Yes. This isn't just a mild disagreement. It is a friendly but incredibly persistent kitchen war over the true origin of the dish.
Two entirely different countries claim they invented it first.
And they both defend that claim with intense national pride. It's almost a competitive sport at this point.
The stakes are surprisingly high for a dessert. On one side, you have Australia's claim.
Right. Your sources detail how Australia asserts that Pavlova was invented in the 1920s.
With a lot of the credit often pointed toward a chef named Herbert Sachs at the Esplanade Hotel in Perth.
Or sometimes tied to her specific tours in Sydney.
Yeah, they plant their flag firmly in that decade, and those locations arguing the dessert was created specifically to honor her arrival on their soil.
But then you have New Zealand stepping into the ring with hard documentation.
They do not mess around with this.
No, they don't. They counter the Australian narrative by stating that the very first actual printed recipe for the dessert appeared in Wellington in 1927.
So you have this vague, narrative-driven timeline claim from Australia going head-to-head with a specific publication date from New Zealand.
You can just imagine the culinary historians in both countries digging through dusty newspaper archives,
Scouring 100-year-old women's magazines.
analyzing handwritten recipe cards just to prove the other country wrong.
What's fascinating here is the outcome of that dispute. After decades of petty, deeply researched debate by food historians, it remains entirely unresolved.
LD1.
There is no definitive, universally agreed-upon winner. However, the result of this ongoing kitchen war is that both countries have fiercely adopted the pavlova.
It isn't just a popular dish on a restaurant menu.
No, both Australia and New Zealand claim it as their official national dessert.
It has become a core, immovable part of their gastronomic identity.
They might fight endlessly over the birth certificate, but they are absolutely united in their cultural reverence for it.
It shows how food can anchor a young nation's cultural identity. Both countries were really defining their independence in culture during that era.
And claiming a world-class dessert was a mark of culinary coming of age.
But to understand why they are so fiercely protective of it, we need to look at what this dessert actually is. Let's dive into the architecture and the science of the bake.
Let's do it.
The culinary notes you sent define the pavlova as a meringue-based dessert, meaning the base is essentially just egg whites and sugar.
Very simple ingredients.
Right. But I've made meringues before, and they usually just turn into dry, crunchy discs. How does the pavlova achieve its signature texture without just turning into a giant, brittle cookie?
Well, the structural difference between a standard meringue and a pavlova is entirely about texture contrast.
Okay.
A classic meringue is baked until it is entirely dry and crisp all the way through. It snaps.
Right, you bite into it and it crumbles.
Exactly. But the pavlova requires a highly specific dual texture profile. On the outside, it develops an incredibly light, crispy, fragile crust.
It shatters almost like thin glass when you tap it with a spoon.
Yeah, but the inside is a completely different world. Soft, cloud-like, and marshmallowy.
That contrast, the delicate crunch giving way to that soft, pillowy center, that is exactly what mimics the ballerina's tutu.
The crisp outer tulle, the soft movement underneath.
But from a purely practical baking standpoint, getting an oven to dry out the outside while keeping the inside wet and fluffy is notoriously difficult.
Oh, it's a nightmare for pastry chefs.
The notes mention that achieving this requires adding cornstarch and a small amount of vinegar to the egg whites.
A pastry chef's secret weapon.
Vinegar makes sense for balancing sweetness, but in the notes you sent, it seems to be doing heavy structural work here rather than just adding flavor.
The chemistry happening in that mixing bowl is remarkable. Egg whites are essentially water and coiled proteins.
Okay.
When you whisk them, you are physically uncoiling those proteins, which then link hands to form a microscopic net that traps air.
That is your foam.
Right. But that net is fragile. When you introduce an acid, like vinegar, it lowers the pH of the mixture.
And what does that do?
This acidic environment stabilizes the protein bonds. It prevents the proteins from binding too tightly together when exposed to the heat of the oven.
Because if they bind too tightly,
They squeeze out all the water, causing the meringue to collapse.
which leads to that dreaded baking fail where your meringue just leaks a sad puddle of sugar syrup all over the baking sheet.
A process known in the baking world as weeping.
Weeping. So the vinegar keeps the structural net relaxed. Where does the cornstarch come in?
The cornstarch acts as an insurance policy for the moisture.
How so?
While the vinegar is managing the proteins, the cornstarch absorbs the excess liquid within that microscopic net.
Oh, I see.
By holding on to that moisture, the cornstarch literally stops the inside of the meringue from completely drying out and hardening while it sits in the oven.
It locks the water in the center.
Exactly, keeping it soft and marshmallow-like, while the outside, which is exposed directly to the dry heat of the oven, forms that beautiful, fragile crust.
It is brilliant kitchen chemistry. You are using acid and starch as a shield against the heat.
It demands absolute precision, too.
Right, because if your oven is a few degrees too hot, the sugar burns and the crust cracks.
And if it's too cool, it never forms the shell.
You even have to let it cool completely inside the turned-off oven, just so the sudden change in room temperature doesn't shatter it.
It's incredibly temperamental.
And of course, mastering that meringue base is only half the story. A bare meringue, no matter how perfectly engineered, is intensely sweet.
Way too sweet on its own.
You need something to balance that sugar load.
The visual and flavor balance relies entirely on the garnishes. Traditionally, the baked meringue is crowned with a thick layer of whipped cream.
But not sweet cream, right?
No, the cream is usually left completely unsweetened or very lightly sweetened. That rich, fatty dairy acts as a crucial buffer against the intense, concentrated sugar of the meringue shell.
The notes you provided go into great detail about the fresh fruits piled on top of that cream.
Strawberries, kiwi, and blackberries are the traditional staples.
The colors alone must be visually stunning. The stark white of the meringue and cream, topped with the bright green of the kiwi, the vibrant red of the strawberries.
The deep purple of the blackberries. It looks like a crown.
The notes also mention that passion fruit or berry sauce is frequently drizzled over the entire thing.
That final drizzle provides a vital culinary function. The sharp tartness and high acidity of the fresh fruit, especially the passion fruit, cut right through the sweetness of the meringue.
And the heavy richness of the cream.
Exactly. When you take a bite, you experience the shatter of the crust, the soft marshmallow center, the cooling cream, and the bright acidic pop of the fruit.
It is a masterclass in balancing textures and flavors on a single spoon.
Truly.
So what does this all mean? Why should you, our listener, care about the history and chemistry of a century-old dessert from the other side of the world?
Well, the sources you sent actually provide a fantastic perspective on its place in modern culture.
This isn't just an archaic recipe locked in a 1920s cookbook.
No, it is an active, vibrant part of how people celebrate today. First of all, it is the ultimate dessert for warm weather climates.
The cultural context of its consumption is key here. Think about the holiday season in Australia and New Zealand.
Christmas falls in December, which is the absolute height of their summer.
The traditional British colonial heritage might suggest serving a heavy, dense, steaming hot Christmas pudding.
But if it is 90 degrees and humid outside, a hot pudding is the last thing anyone wants to eat.
The Pavlova solved that culinary cognitive dissonance perfectly.
It feels like a light, refreshing summer treat rather than a dense cake.
Because of that, it has become the absolute centerpiece of Christmas dinners, summer celebrations, and family gatherings across Oceania.
Is the anchor of their summer table.
But what really jumped out from the text you sent over is the Pavlova's global reach today. It isn't just confined to the Southern Hemisphere anymore.
Not at all.
The sources highlight that the Pavlova has recently surged in popularity in, of all places, Turkey.
The cross-cultural adoption is a fascinating modern development. According to the notes, the pavlova is appearing with increasing frequency in local Turkish patisseries and home kitchens.
Turkey has a rich, ancient tradition of its own sweets and pastries.
So seeing a dessert created in the 1920s for a Russian dancer in Australia finding a passionate new audience in modern Istanbul is remarkable.
It speaks to the universal appeal of that specific flavor profile.
The lightness, the fresh fruit, the elegant presentation, it entirely transcends its origin story.
It really does. It is a dessert that travels exceptionally well, culturally speaking.
It adapts to the local fruits and the local palates.
But stepping back from the history and the global spread, the sources you provided dedicate a section to the philosophy of the pavlova, which I found deeply compelling.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the pavlova represents a beautiful paradox in the culinary arts.
It is born from just three incredibly basic elements.
The sources list them quite poetically: egg whites, sugar, and patience.
That is the very foundation. It is the definition of minimalism.
Yet, to execute it correctly requires a highly delicate balance of microscopic variables. You have these humble, everyday ingredients demanding absolute perfection and technique from the baker.
The sources share a brilliant quote from the culinary world, describing it as a dessert that looks simple but requires mastery.
And this brings the entire story perfectly full circle back to Anna Pavlova herself.
Think about what a ballerina does. They take the basic human body and, through immense discipline, grueling practice, and mastery, create something that looks completely effortless.
Weightless and simple to the audience in the theater.
The physical reality of ballet is rigorous, demanding, and often painful technique.
All hidden beneath a delicate, beautiful, and pristine exterior.
The chef who invented this didn't just recreate the visual shape of her tutu, they managed to capture the underlying philosophy of her art form.
The chaotic kitchen chemistry required to make the pristine white meringue is the exact equivalent of the bleeding toes inside the beautiful satin shoe.
Wow, yes. The sources call it a dance in the kitchen, and I cannot think of a more perfect phrase for it.
The dancer makes the impossible look easy on stage, and the baker makes this incredibly temperamental chemical reaction look like a simple, fluffy cloud on the plate.
To wrap up this deep dive, let's summarize what we've discovered in these sources today.
The pavlova is so much more than a delicious summer treat.
It is a living monument to a global pop culture icon.
It is a centerpiece of fierce national pride and gastronomic identity for two different countries.
And perhaps most impressively, it is a masterclass in baking chemistry.
A delicate balancing act of proteins, acid, and temperature that results in pure magic.
It really is.
This raises an important question, and it's something to ponder long after we finish today.
What's that?
We've explored how a 1920s chef perfectly translated the physical essence, the movement, and the artistic spirit of a ballet dancer into a meringue. I challenge you to think beyond the plate.
Oh, that's interesting.
What other art forms or famous historical figures could be translated into food? If you had to invent a dessert that captured the exact texture, feeling, and essence of your favorite musician, or a painter whose work you admire, or a writer whose books you devour, what ingredients would you use to tell their story?
How would you translate a chaotic jazz trumpet solo or the stark lines of a modernist painting into a flavor profile?
Would a rock musician's dessert be something with a hard caramel shatter and a sudden spicy chili kick?
Would a romantic poet be represented by something complex involving rosewater, dark bitter chocolate, and sea salt?
It really makes you look at the food you eat and the art you consume in a completely different way.
It definitely does. I want to warmly thank you, the listener, for bringing such fascinating sources to the table for us to explore today. Who knew a mixture of egg whites and sugar could hold so much history, science, and cultural identity? Keep seeking out the amazing stories hidden in your everyday lives, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.